To still surround and destroy Ukrainian forces in the east as President Biden calls for a war crimes trial against Russian President Vladimir Putin. Join us now, ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman, along with ABC News national security and defense analyst and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy. James, let's start with you. You're in country. You are in Bucha. You saw the gruesome remains from this attack firsthand. Pretty hard to deny that these are not war crimes.
Well, it's a big claim, but certainly what we saw suggested something awful has happened in these places. The first place we went to, and apologies, sorry, that's the air siren now here in Kyiv, but we'll continue for the moment.
Tell us what you need to do, James. Do you need
no, we're okay for the moment. Yeah, so
sure?
We're fine. We're fine. Yeah. So it's just a warning, but I think we're fine where we are here. We were taken first of all to a village just outside of Bucha, about 20 miles outside of Bucha, where we were led through this kind of huge field. There were a number of different broken down houses. We saw the remnants of what was quite clearly Russian military, Russian troops, what they'd left behind from their essential squatting in people's homes, their kind of rubbish. We saw old uniforms that they'd left behind. And we were led through down towards a wood. And it was a stunning scene, actually, very green. It's a beautiful part of Ukraine. But then we came to a clearing in the wood, and there, among the trees in the sand, were the bodies of 4 people who had been partially buried. We saw a woman, we now understand her to be Olga. She was the mayor of that town, and Ukrainians tell us that it was her husband, her son, and another unidentified male who were discovered in that grave, and they say were executed for not willing to collaborate with the Russians. They couldn't be exhumed, they said to us, the Ukrainians who were with us there, because they were worried that their bodies were booby-trapped with mines. And so it was just an absolutely horrific scene. These bodies were partially decomposed. You could see their some of their hands kind of poking out of the sand in what was otherwise a very beautiful and tranquil scene. So those two things were very jarring. And just next to that grave, there was a small bunker, and that would have been where Russians were sitting and waiting for weeks. Remember, this was over 4 weeks Russians were in this part of Ukraine, and we saw signs of them everywhere. And it seemed to us that this was a story of large numbers of untrained, undisciplined young men who ran riot in this part of northern Ukraine. We went then to another location, what was a summer camp in Ukraine, used, it looked to us, by Russian troops as a kind of informal base where they would hang out, drink, burn bonfires, drive cars around, smash cars up, and yes, possibly also dispose of the bodies of people that they had executed. We went down to the basement underneath one of these buildings and saw the bodies of 5 men, and there I saw their hands bound. It was unclear if they'd actually been killed there or had been moved and disposed of there. There was blood up against the walls. Just about everywhere you go here, there is a story of something like this having happened. And it will be now up to the Ukrainian investigators to establish what has gone on, whether these are in fact war crimes. It's very difficult in a war to have that kind of parallel legal system, but Ukraine is very keen to show the world that it is a country that respects the rule of law, where justice is served, and they want justice for these victims, their families, and they want to bring the perpetrators to justice as well. Whether that last point is possible, will ever be possible, who knows, but Ukraine's going to try. Kira?
Boy, you just you hear, first of all, James, just listening to air raid sirens, and now we're hearing church bells. I mean, you talk about the reality of hearing the two forces of good and possible evil right there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, daily life does people do try to continue. I mean, that church bell has been ringing on the hour every hour, and I've got to say, when you're here in Kyiv, you know, you do hear the sounds of the alarms, the stories of the deaths of people on the outskirts of this city, the horrific war crimes that may have been perpetrated, and yet people here in Kyiv are trying very hard to kind of get on with their lives at the same time. It's kind of a strange juxtaposition.
And clearly comes down to faith. Listening to what James just said, Mick, I mean, just a couple things that stood out to me. Untrained, undisciplined behavior, what James saw, what he witnessed, how he described it. No doubt Bucha has to play into this case in order to hold Vladimir Putin accountable for what we are talking about now, and that's war crimes.
Absolutely, and from President Putin and for our defense minister Shoigu on down to the officers that ordered those atrocities, they should all be held accountable. They should be publicly named, and whether it takes for as long as it takes, they should be held accountable, brought to the ICC. If they can't get them to the ICC, they should be tried in absentia, and the sanctions, quite frankly, should never be removed until those individuals face justice. Absolutely.
The president, President Biden, stopped short, Mick, of calling these killings of these civilians genocide. Why was that?
So as Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, stated, there's a certain credentials or certain things that have to happen for that to be reached. I don't know what that is, but we're only 5-6 weeks into this. So as long as this goes on, the chances that this reaches this mass killings, these atrocities, these obvious war crimes, it's essentially a series of war crimes, it's masquerading as a military campaign, will likely get to the level of genocide. But whether it does or doesn't, everybody that conducts these atrocities needs to be held accountable. This is not what soldiers do. This is what war criminals do. This is not an army. This is, as James mentioned, this is a bunch of thugs, and that's how they're acting, and that's how they should be treated.
Point made. And James, just give us the latest on troop movements now, what you are seeing from where you are with regard to Russian troops and also Ukrainian military holding strong.
Yeah, so, well, we understand now that the bulk of the Russian troops that were in the northern Kyiv region have returned to Belarus, which is, of course, where many of them were stationed before. The great fear, the possibility, is that they are regrouping and resupplying to perhaps return to this part of Ukraine, even though that is what Russia has said won't happen. They've said they're now focusing on the east of this country, but Ukraine doesn't believe anything that Russia says, so very much this city is still on high alert for the possibility that they do return. Vladimir Putin has consistently said he wants to, what he calls, denazify this country. And so people in this city are not ruling out the possibility of troops returning to Ukraine to try to encircle Kyiv. It now can't happen very soon, but it may still be part of the Russian calculus. We just don't know at this point. But yes, the focus now for Russia does look to be on the east. We've seen an uptick in attacks in the Donbass region, and it is possible that Russia will have more success, quote unquote success, there because they're that much closer to their supplies. They're not as far away from the border as they found themselves here in Kyiv, unable to resupply, unable to support their troops in the field. What they thought would happen was that when they entered villages, towns like Bucha, where we went today, people would come out to welcome them with Russian flags. That was the great Russian miscalculation. And what they've ended up with is a mess. And what we saw today was the futility of this war. What I saw today was men and women murdered for no reason, for absolutely no reason. And that is really what comes to define this entire conflict. It has been, so far, completely pointless for Russia. It has only really served to weaken them in the eyes of the world. And that realization, and possibly the fury that will come with that realization, may be meted out in the east of this country. Kira.
And as you talk about Bucha and President Zelensky, I don't know if we can roll that video, Josh, again, showing President Zelensky there in Bucha actually speaking with the press. There we go. I mean, he made his way there. He talked to the press, and he talked about how he needs aid and that it needs to be make its way to Ukraine. What do you think they are still missing, Mick? And James, you can add in as well, too, from what you know. You were there. But, Mick, what is Zelensky asking for? What does he need as he stands there where James just was and witnessed, as you said, this thug behavior?
So, Kara, in addition to everything that we've already given them, we need to give them more. But there's three main categories. So, advanced air and missile defense systems. So, systems that have a higher reach, like the S-300 and the S-400. These are Russian-made systems that the Ukrainians know how to use. There's several NATO partners, Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, that have them. They can get in there. They can help them defend their own citizens. And quite frankly, they can remove the advantage the Russians have with air. The second, I would say, is anything that allows them to do maneuver warfare. The Ukrainians are on the offensive, and they need to be able to stay on the offensive. So they need to have helicopter transport, such as the Mi-17s, also Russian-made. Also, Ukrainians know how to fly them and already are flying them. And also vehicles, tactical vehicles they can move around quickly on the ground. And lastly, as the National Security Advisor stated, they need coastal defense. So one of the key areas, other than the east, is in the south, Odessa. The Russians have naval infantry that's offshore. Anything they can do to take out those ships. So the UK is sending them. They have this system called Neptune. We need to get as many as they can. We need to take out the ships that are in the Black Sea to help protect Odessa.
Final thoughts, James, as Zelensky goes to Bucha, makes his claim that he needs more weapons. How do you think that'll impact how he's able to continue to fight?
Well, hugely. I mean, I was in Bucha, as you heard today. When I was there when Zelensky came, actually, it was quite a moment. He's quite a small person when you sort of stand him up against all his commandos who are surrounding him. But wow, he has presence. And, you know, he's been such a face of his country's resistance. And now he's becoming now a voice of the outrage that this country feels about some of the atrocities that we're seeing. The pressure may grow on the West to act more. What does that look like? Well, possibly Europe strengthening its sanctions, particularly around things like oil. I mean, I know there's been a lot of pressure on Germany. What we're seeing now out of Bucha and what we will continue to see out of other towns and villages may continue to strengthen that pressure. And on what Ukraine needs, I mean, I spoke to a fighter pilot here, one of the ghosts of Kyiv, as they come to be known, and he said he's been hiding in the sky, protecting his city, full of passion, full of patriotism. But he said exactly what Mick was saying there. They have all the passion, but they need the technology. And I think people at home might think of, when it comes to fighting in the air, they might think of it as the dogfights that you see, we know from the Second World War, where jets go at one another in the air. That is not the reality here in Ukraine. They are trying to avoid very, very well-developed, highly accurate Russian technology, and they need something to combat that. And that is what President Zelensky has been calling for since day one. We'll see if he gets it.
Our James Longman, Mick Mulroy, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.